Hey everyone, Pastor George here with today's episode of A New Thing. And today we are going to be talking about, Good Friday stuff, even though it's Monday, Thursday, uh, in keeping with the tradition of the fact that we don't have a Good Friday service. But this does give us something to think about. And we're going to look at a few, I've on my little notepad here, a few parts of the Gospels. We're going to examine the thieves on the crosses next to Jesus. That's what we're going to talk about today because I think it actually highlights how unique and significant Jesus is, and something I really, really, really like to harp on in our current cultural context. I know that I've said this in a few different places, but it is always worth repeating in today's age. So you'll once you get there, you'll know what it is. Let me just pull this article up real quickly. I I mean, I haven't. So let me be very clear. I haven't read this article. I've skimmed it, and my response has nothing to do with the article. Mostly to do with kind of things I've been seeing. So this is from Sojourners. Anyone who doesn't know, Sojourners is a left-leaning Christian website, and this is from last year. Of course, the war in Gaza is still going on today, and this is from someone who is a Palestinian Christian. And I bring this up only because this is someone who claims that Jesus is a Palestinian. And I bring this up this time not to talk about Israel Palestine. It's just that I often see during this time of year lots of Facebook posts and other places saying stuff like Jesus was a Palestinian rebel crucified by the state, right? And a lot of this has modern political connotations that people are taking and putting back there. Basically, all I say, as someone who's very invested in history and in the text, that to use like a modern term to say that Jesus is Israeli or Jesus is Palestinian is wrong. Only because those ideas didn't exist then. I think you would say Jesus is a Jew or he's Judean. I think that's the easiest way that you could talk about that, right? Anyway, not here to debate about this. I actually want to mostly focus on the claims because oftentimes you'll see this paired with the fact that Jesus is fighting against the state. I'll put this in the information below the video if you want to read this article. I haven't done a deep dive into it, but I would guess that Jesus is presented as sort of rebel in this case. But I could be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. But I actually want to focus. This is a common misreading of Jesus, is that Jesus was a rebel crucified by the Romans. Like the most famous book I saw that came out, kind of purporting to have this view. It seems recent, but like when did this book come out? 2013, so almost a decade ago. It was by Reza Aslan. He was a reporter for CNN. I don't know what he does now. I remember the one thing I remember most about him is he like did a series on religion, and he went to India, and there's these groups of people in India, of Hindus, in the river Ganges, and uh, and what they'll do is they'll eat dead people at Varanasi, which is a very kind of holy city in Hinduism. They'll take the dead people that are on the river and eat them. And Reza Aslan ate some dead people, so he committed cannibalism and filmed it, and everyone got to see it. In any case, right, he makes the argument in this that Jesus was a rebel. You can see that, right? Zealot, the life and times of Jesus of Nazareth. Zealots were a particular group of people who lived at that time who were politically committed to getting the Romans out. Of course, it was also kind of a religious movement as well, and used violence. And so, basically, his argument is that Jesus was one of these rebels. And I think this is really important today because we live in a very political age, and people like to use Jesus politically to fulfill their own ends. And it's funny because when you read the Gospels and you understand that that's actually happening in the text as well with Jesus's disciples, they want to use Jesus that way too. Something he continually kind of pushes against, that he's not this messianic claimant that people expect him to be. And so I want to actually focus on that by shifting focus away from Jesus and on these two other guys that are often part of our stories that we tell this year, the crucifixion narratives that we get in the Gospels. about Jesus and how they're described and how they contrast themselves, or at least in one section, how it's contrasted with Jesus. So the first place I want to look is Mark 15, which is where we're at now. Um, so Jesus is being crucified. If you're familiar with these passages, you would kind of be able to see this. But Jesus is being crucified. He's taken to Golgotha, and on verse 26, you can see in the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." So Jesus is being tried for sedition and rebellion. That is why they're trying him. So I guess if you could say on paper this is the case, but if you actually look at how Jesus's followers, the early Christian church understands this, and Jesus himself, you'll see that this is the way that the leaders get rid of him is by getting this charge against him, right? Pontius Pilate actually tells them, I don't think there's anything wrong with him. His blasphemy is not a crime, but instead that the Jewish leaders kind of force Pilate's hand, and Pilate doesn't really care. He doesn't really come off as great. In any case, right? You'll see here it says, "And with him they crucified two robbers, one on his right and one on his left." Here, let me pull this up. This is interlinear, so I can probably show you guys so under the Greek, you can see the translation here. In this section, let's find verse 27. All right. So you can see here, Kai Sun, Alto, and with him together, Staurusen, they crucified Duo to Leistas right here. And you'll see here it says robber, highwayman, bandit, robbers. And this is how it's translated here, right? I think it says they crucified two robbers. So just remember that. That's kind of important. Luke, which is a passage we're going to return to, but I just want to show you this is how it translates what they are, or Luke says they are. So the two others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. You'll see here it describes them as criminals. Eterkakorgoi. Eteroi kakergoi. Other kakorgoi, which really in Greek literally means like bad workers, like people who work evil or people who work bad. It's the generic word for a criminal. Luke uses it here. Paul uses it to describe himself when he's in chains. So it's like criminals. So it's not a very specific term. It's more of a broad term. Like we would say felon or something like that, right? It's like just a generic kind of criminal. All right. Matthew. How does Matthew describe these guys? This is Matthew 27, 38. So here you can see, then two robbers were crucified with him. In the Greek, tote stauruntai, soon alto duo lacetai. So again, right, you have the lace tie. Now here's the thing. This word is a really interesting word, because we often remember this as the thieves, right? That's how it's kind of taught, or even robbers, but it's a little bit more than that. I actually do want to see what John has to say. So this is just the crucifixion. You'll see John says they were crucified with him, and they crucified him, and with him two others, one on either side, and Jesus between them. So it doesn't talk about like who they were, but there's another time that this word lace tie shows up, and this will be maybe a little bit helpful. This is another famous story. This is after Pilate has questioned Jesus. He went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I should release one man for you at Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." And then John just adds this at the end. He said, "Now Barabbas was a robber." And I'm sure you can guess what that word is. If you guess that word is lestes or lesta, you would be right. It's robber, thief. You'll notice here it says revolutionary, a revolutionary. This is one of the glosses for it as a translation thing, right? And that actually makes it a lot more interesting, because you'll notice that this is not thievery. When we think of thief, we use a very modern idea of it, which is fine, which is like We have to, like someone who sneaks in and steals, um, or someone who is scheming and trying to shoplifts or something. That's theft in our culture, right? Well, I always like looking it up because so much of these words we get from the King James. So I always like looking up like what did thief mean, kind of in the older sense, because I think it's worth seeing kind of how words change. So you'll notice here, this is from the Etymological Dictionary online. It says in Middle English, also this describes thief describes poachers, cheats, pirates, braggarts, usurers, and a general term of reproach for lawless and deceitful persons. So den of thieves, a common way used to describe in the Bible, right? Abode of the lawless is from the late 14th century. Den of thieves. The earlier phrase was thieves' ditch, which is kind of interesting. And then you can see here in the 1800s, it kind of takes these things become separate. It says a thief takes other people's property without their knowledge. A robber takes it openly, whether or not resistance is offered. In a looser sense, thief is often applied to one who takes a small amount, and robber to the one who takes a large amount. Now, I'm not going to say that these guys aren't stealing. In fact, we know that these types would. It was these like rebel groups that would move around this area in Judea. They would often steal, but they would also kill a lot of people. So this is also the word that's used for robbers setting upon the guy in the parable of the Good Samaritan. This is the same people. But these people, by testimony of what we see in other places, these are politically motivated people. So in that political motivation, it is often caught up with ideas of taking money, taking things, stuff like that. That's a part of it. But it's not the whole thing. And I think when we're going to be talking about political ideas today, we should note that the guys who are with Jesus are actually like political revolutionary. I don't want to say activists because not all this, but like you get it, right? That these are people who are politically motivated to overthrow the current order of things through violence. All right, and that is what people expected the Messiah to do. Talked about this quite a bit in a few of my sermons. Jesus has no interest in doing that from the evidence that we have, right? So in a book like this, it's kind of, you have to kind of project it. You have to say, oh, well, and this is kind of the criticism that was given of this book at the time. It was like, well, yeah, we don't have evidence for this, but maybe, the Christians later tried to change the narrative, or, what about these other things or whatever. So just to note that this is very not from the scholarly perspective of what Jesus was about, but it was expected of him. And this is why he partially ended up on cross, why people kind of forced him to try and do this type of thing. And now I now want to return to Luke 23, just to kind of like hammer this point home a little bit. So we read this already, right? Two others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him. And the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they cast lots to divide his garments, and the people stood by watching. But the rulers scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself. If he is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was also an inscription over him, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us. But the other rebuked him, saying, Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. And he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And he said to him, Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. And then Luke goes on to describe how Jesus dies. But I really want to focus on this, right? This section here, at the end, you see a contrast between this. These two guys, and some people, I forgot a very important thing that I want to bring up. Sorry, I forgot about this. These two guys are being tried for being robbers, highwaymen, bandits, revolutionaries, right? I forgot. Yeah. So in this, right, just this word to describe Barabbas is the same word, lacetai. I bring that up because, wrong one. I bring that up because what these guys, some people make a big deal about this. And they make a big deal about it because they will say that these two guys were maybe Barabbas's companions. We have no evidence of that. But it gets at this idea, right, that maybe there was this group that was currently had just been kind of taken by the Romans, and now they're being crucified for this. The point is that these guys are very, very aware of what they've done, and even on the cross, this guy is mocking Jesus, or is upset with Jesus, because he's like, you're saying the Messiah, you should be able to stop this from happening. You should have you should lead a rebellion and stop this, right? Try and rally the people to do this. And the other one realizes on a deeper level of what's going on. He realizes the thing that they've been doing deserves the punishment that they're getting. Right? They tried to overthrow the Roman state. They probably killed people and stole things and did all other sorts of evil things, right? So he understands that he should die for what he's done, but that Jesus never actually stood for any of these things, and so he doesn't deserve it. And then, of course, he turns in faith and asks Jesus to remember him. And even in here, right, it's like he understands that Jesus isn't this. When people normally say this stuff to Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, right, I think of James and John fighting to see who gets to sit on Jesus's left and right. They're thinking very politically. They think that Jesus is actually going to be on a throne and they'll get to be his favorite advisors. Here, this guy knows Jesus is going to die, but understands on a deeper spiritual level of what Jesus is about, and that his kingdom is a greater kingdom than what is going to be seen or hoped for by these political revolutionaries. And of course, Jesus promises him, today you will be with me in paradise. So, very kind of intense moment on the cross here. So I just want to bring it back as I close this out and say, during this time of year, right, a lot of people like to use Jesus, and every time of year, but especially during holidays, right, people like to use Jesus politically. I think we have to remember that in our current age, when politics is the biggest idol that we can have, I really believe this. It's either that or money. And it's a combination of both for many of us, and of course many other things as well. But politics is the big false religion of our current age. And so many people like to use God, Jesus, the Bible, in order to push their special agendas. And I think we are easily able to fight against that if we remember the thieves on the cross. Because there's a contrast. And the contrast is not just that they're sinners and Jesus isn't, which is usually kind of the point. It's that they were political revolutionaries. And they contrast themselves with Jesus and what he's done. So when we start to say, oh, Jesus is, a political revolutionary, he's on my side, he's not on your side, we start to end up in the same misunderstanding that so many people is, where we read Jesus as coming to do or bring something that he was not here to do. Of course, what we believe should impact our politics, and we should be involved. But the second that one of them starts to take precedent, or we're not allowing Jesus to check our own politics, that's when we fall into serious issue. And so let this Good Friday and this reminder of the thieves on the cross be a remembrance that politics is not the be-all, end-all, and that eventually, right, we all, like Jesus, unlike Jesus, like the thieves on the cross, deserve condemnation, but instead Jesus offers us forgiveness. So just remember that, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope that was a good word for you, and I will see you on Sunday for worship, also tonight for Maundy Thursday service. So looking forward to that. Hope you have a wonderful day. Peace out.